thank you, sir, for such an enlightening talk. So, me, some key takeaways from it were, like you said, he changed the situation from the Israeli-Arab conflict to an Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He put Iran on the agenda that it was the main threat to Israeli security. Then, the important thing was also there that it is not post Netanyahu, which we need to understand. And then, ultimately, all his gains will be there. And at the end, he might have left office. His influence still very much remains and would remain in the decades to come. So, before moving to the Q&A, the participants who want to ask a question, I request them to use the raise a hand option so that I can announce their name and the process is smoothened. Any questions?
Oh yes, who is that? This is
Yes.
Apurva. Okay. Oh
Yes.
God. Oh God. Oh God. One by one. Okay.
Yes. Apurva, go ahead.
Ladies first.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Hey, can you put the video? At least I can see you. No, this is not fair on your part.
Just a second, sir.
At least when you're asking question, I should see, right? Okay, good. Nice to see you guys.
Hi. So my question is regarding, like you mentioned, that for the first time an Arab party is a part of the coalition. So does having an Arab party be such a significant part of the coalition provide any catalyst to like to solve the Palestinian issue? Like in the sense that will the government actually work towards like probably having some sort of solution, like given that an Arab party is now a member of coalition, and if it suppose removes its support, so the government could fall.
Can I answer immediately, right?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. You know, in the short run, no. If you look at the Arab party is fighting at two fronts. One, they try to influence the Israeli government policy. At other level, they are fighting with other Arab parties who are trying to delegitimize them. Oh, you are a fig leaf of difference. So therefore, the first priority for an Arab party is not the peace process. The priority is to tell their electorate back home to say that joining the government is good for the Israeli Arab population. That is the first priority. And if you look at the statements made by the government, they announced enormous financial benefits for the community. They said very clearly, this is what will happen. And they said the recognition of the Bedouin villages, not demolishing the houses, or not declaring the houses as illegal. These are the things which are very important. And the second thing is, you know, when you're talking about Israel's peace with the Arab countries or the Palestinian population, and for that, you need to have peace inside. You cannot say Israel will treat the Arabs in a hostile way, but have a friendly relation with the Palestinians in the West Bank. No, it won't work. So the first priority is peace at home. So it is good for the Arab parties to focus on the domestic agenda. It is also good for the Israeli government to focus on the domestic agenda. The logic is simple. Maybe few months down the ladder, when there is a no confidence motion against the government, the Arab parties may abstain. Who are not part of the government, they may abstain, or they may even support the government. So for them, that is critical. So the peace process is critical for the Palestinians. But if you look at the Israeli Arab parties, it is their interest is primary, and peace process will come at a later stage. Peace process will be a beneficiary. Put it simply, a peace between Israel and Palestinians will not improve the life of Israeli Arabs. But a peace between Israel and the Arab citizens will create a very congenial atmosphere for the peace with the outside world. You need to have peace inside. And that is how I look at the Ram party's role in the coalition.
Thanks, Apurva. Aditya Kumar Singh, next, please.
Thanks, Abhishek. Sir, you mentioned about Netanyahu's stature, and you also mentioned that no one would be able to fill in his boots. So, but given his personality and the way he conducts himself, should we really consider him to be a gone case, or will he be able to make a comeback at some point of time?
Okay, it's not, one cannot rule out the comeback Netanyahu. He's a enormous resilient person. And the comeback need not be as a prime minister. In Israel, people have a lesser ego. We have a person who was a president of Israel, and when the term ended, he decided not to contest for the second term, but becomes an education minister in the next government. And same thing, Shimon Peres was a prime minister, and he suddenly became regional cooperation minister under Ehud Barak. So people don't have the ego hassles. So you can always. So therefore, I would say that Netanyahu's comeback cannot be ruled out. At the same time, while there is not many other options available, or you say Tina factor in politics, there is no alternative. And Netanyahu might face challenge on two accounts. There are equally ambitious people and who are not charismatic like Netanyahu, but ambition has no limits. The second thing is, as I said, Netanyahu has dominated the Israeli political landscape from 1992. 30 years. And people feel, hey, I know a lot of Israelis who told me, I'm a right-wing guy, but I want a new guy. Please, I'm tired of this face. So people want a new face from even on the right. So these two things are going to work against him. And the third thing is the corruption scandal, which the parliamentary immunity goes. Now is only immunity as only a member of Knesset, not as a prime minister, sitting prime minister. So therefore, if you put all of the things, I don't think so that it's going to be easy for Netanyahu to come back.
Thanks, Aditya. Irfan Nazari next, please.
Hi, sir. I just have a question that you said that the Abraham Accords, which was signed, had a tactical support from Saudi Arabia when UAE and Bahrain went. But if in recent 1 or 2 weeks of what is happening in GCC in particular, where Saudi Arabia and the UAE are on each other's neck in OPEC over the oil question, then you see that Omani Sultan visiting Riyadh and trying to enhance their cooperation and probably using Oman as a mediator between Tehran and Riyadh. So my question is that in a way, we say that the Benjamin Netanyahu's foreign policy success or Israel's foreign policy success in general to do with your fragmented Arab unity. So is that a reason why Israel is able to gain hold in the region?
You can say fragmented unity in a way which is not incorrect. For a long time, what was the unifying factor of the Arab League? Anti-Israeli rhetoric. If you take away that, there is nothing to unify. The common language, common culture, common heritage. If you look at, there is no common political goal. Democracy and republics. But even in the republican, Baath Party is in Iraq, Baath Party was in Syria. They never went along. So if you look at it, Israel was almost the only unifying factor for the Arab League. But over a period of time, you need more than that. Remember one thing, anti-something will actually unify a lot of people. But to survive that, you need to have a positive contribution. Merely saying, I'm opposed to this, let's all unite. It won't take you a long journey. So what has happened is the internal divisions or internal disagreements could not be overcome, by the common agenda of opposition to Israel. They had done it for the last 60 years and it didn't work. So individual interests become important. But my understanding is, while there are differences constantly within all these countries, when it comes to relations with Israel, my understanding is Emirate and Bahrain consulted and got a green signal from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia actually is probably said, I cannot do it, you can go ahead and do it. I have a compulsion, you go and do it. The reason is simple. The bulk of the Bahraini budget comes from Saudi Arabia. So therefore, Bahrain had to listen to what Saudi Arabia says. You have enormous dependency. Similarly, Emirati ruler and the Saudi ruler are in great agreement on a variety of issues. So the relation would not have happened without the tacit Saudi support. The other issues are there, but the fragmentation was there from 1945. Nothing new.
Thanks, Irfan. It's Kelvin Benny next, please.
Hey, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, but you're not visible.
Sir.
Good.
Sir, my doubt is something related to South Asia. I means that I want to know about if you can give a brief picture about Israel-Pakistan relations. Because the thing I am asking this is that I have, in a brief, I have read about existence of secret relations between Israel and Pakistan. So what is the possibility of Pakistan normalizing its relation with Israel? Could you shed some light on it?
Okay, about 20 years ago, I wrote a monograph on Israel and Pakistan relations. It was published in Israel 20 years ago, 2000. To cut the story short, Pakistan and Israel had a tacit exchanges right from even before 47, even before both states were established. There were contacts and dealings over a period of time. There are two difficulties. Within Pakistan, the realist school talks about, everybody is having a relation with Israel. The Palestinians have relations with Israel. The Arab countries are moving relations with Israel. India has went and established and strengthened relations. And China is doing it. So why should I be alone? Let me also join and benefit by that or minimize the damage. That is one school of thought. The second school of thought is we are more Arab than Arafat. Because, if you look at it, even when Arafat is ready to do, we will not. Read, if you look at the writings during the Oslo process, they were using all sorts of abusive terms against Arafat. So the conservative element thing, even if the Palestinians were to do it, we will not abandon the Palestinians. More Catholic than the Pope. So therefore, and that level is it. So therefore, it is a tussle between these two schools. So the pro-relations one often make a statement, write articles. Sometimes they make a visit to Israel. The anti one equally do demonstrations and everything. And Israel is also dealing with Pakistan in probably mostly in the United Nations. That's my understanding. And yes, sir.
Sir, can I interrupt? The thing is that, as far as I understood, Israel and Pakistan have a tacit understanding during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Because I have read that the weapons captured from PLO were transferred to the Mujahideen. So actually, geopolitics may force them to cooperate tacitly, if there are any. Sir, pardon my error if any. I am not an expert. So my question is that now Iran is Israel's one of the greatest enemy. And regarding Iran and Pakistan, I think many Arab nations are using Pakistan to create issues inside Iran, like that Jundallah, militant group Jundallah. So will Israel use Pakistan? It will be a quid pro quid pro quo agreement, because they will give monetary or other incentives to Pakistan. For Pakistan, I think the money or other issues matter, because that's why they will they will be pragmatic in that. So, will there any chance of tacit Pakistan-Israel understanding regarding Iran?
You know, if you're talking about the Afghanistan phase, at that time, it made sense to deal with Pakistan because no other country was dealing with Israel. India did not have relations. You know, this is a pre-92. Today, large number of countries having relations with Israel. So therefore, Pakistan's relative utility has come down, number one. And if Israel were to do something against Iran, you don't need Pakistan. They can do it from Emirates.
For Azerbaijan.
Okay. Exactly. They can do there are a million other ways.
Okay, sir.
And you know, Pakistan's utility has completely come down. And more importantly, while Israel can develop relations with Pakistan, that comes with a price. India.
Public trust in India.
Exactly. So therefore, Israel will be very careful. They will not do a suicide attempt. They know that if you move closer to Israel, it comes at the cost in New Delhi. So it's a cost-benefit analysis. And Pakistan is not as important as it was 30 years ago.
Okay, sir.
Today,
okay, sir. I just asked. Sorry for the interruption. I just asked because as far I have understood, for Israel, it is very hyper pragmatic nation, because during the Sri Lankan civil war, I have read that Israel have sold weapons both to Sri Lankan armed forces as well as LTTE. So, in such an hyper pragmatism of Israel, I asked about the potential ties with Pakistan. Sometimes it may be intelligence ties or some other ties.
Okay. Even on Sri Lanka, that was my first academic article once again sometime in the 80s. So I was one of the first guys to write about Israel and Sri Lanka. And I also first want to write about Israel and Pakistan. So these are all old stories. It's there. But the question is this. Pakistan's importance in the 80s is different. Pakistan's importance today is different. Because Israel has more options available. And therefore, you don't need physical presence. You can do electronic surveillance. They're attacking the Iranian nuclear reactor without any physical presence. So therefore, you know, it's the relative changes in geostrategic conditions is a factor.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Kelvin. I remember the term you used, hyper pragmatism. So I'll treat on that. Okay. Next, Nazir Ahmed, please. Good to see you after so long.
Oh, yes. Same here.
Doctor, good evening. This is Nazir from Kabul, Afghanistan.
Oh, God. Good.
Okay. My question goes to first was that about the return of the Benjamin Netanyahu to power. I received my answer because one before me asked. I would like to ask you, Mr. Professor, how is the stability of this cabinet in Israel? Because they are a combination of the few parties together, and especially as you mentioned, the Arabs are at one hand and fundamental Jew at the another hand, as a prime minister. So if they wanted the prime minister want to take a drastic action, will it be able to last long or no?
Thanks. You know, first of all, stay well, my friend. Stay well. I'm really great to see you, and stay well and stay safe. And prayers for your health and welfare. The coalition came after 3 years of turmoil. The Knesset was dissolved in December 2018. And from that time till now, they faced 4 elections. Netanyahu largely stayed as caretaker government, almost 2 years. The unity government he formed simply collapsed because he was not ready to fulfill the agreed commitments, the change of power. So, and all the coalition partners, in spite of all the difficulties, they know the alternative is elections. And no one wants that. No one wants election because you never know. People will be furious with this situation. And therefore, just like you are saying, all the internal contradiction, they are aware. Nothing is new to them. Because they were living on this contradiction all these years. Now they have to reconcile with each other. Look at this. The finance minister was having a rally against the Arabs not long ago. Not long ago, he said, any government which depends on the Arab is a delegitimized government. And today he is coexisting with them not because he has suddenly become a liberal. No. He recognizes if the choice is simple, join hands with the Islamic parties and prevent the Haredi from dominating the society. Or allow the Haredi greater power and they harm your daily life. So if you look at it, if I have to use the primary and the secondary contradictions, the Haredi is a primary threat. The Haredi parties are actually taking away the religious rights of the Soviet immigrants from Soviet Union. That is more dangerous than the Islamic party. And similarly, for the Islamic party, coexisting with this one is better than staying in the margin for another 2 decades. So they are aware. Therefore, don't expect anything dramatic. No. Dramatic means you will collapse. All of them are aware. So whatever happens will be very slow, very progressive, and limited. And if the government survives for 2 years, that would be an enormous achievement. And they will achieve by that. The very idea that you coexist for 2 years means you become more accommodating. It becomes very normal. So, but I don't expect anything dramatic immediately.
Thanks, Nazir.
Thank you. Thank you, Abhishek.
Take care. Next in line is Kesavan M, please. If you could switch your camera and unmute yourself.
Hello, sir.
Yes,
This is
sir.
Keswan. I'm from Chennai. Like
Can
we
you
also
video,
spoke.
sir?
Yeah. Okay.
Good.
Like we know that Congress in past during Rajiv Gandhi era, India was very close to PLO, and even Yasser Arafat sent an emissary to Government of India and Rajiv Gandhi on the threat of his assassination. And how it changed during the Congress, another full term, I mean the UPA 1 and 2. Like how it evolved.
You're completely talking about 20 years of time frame.
Yeah, I know.
Rajiv Gandhi was in the late 80s.
Yeah.
And India was in 2000. In between, we had somebody called Narasimha Rao. Okay. Narasimha Rao normalized relations, but if you look at it, the real issue is the global politics.
Okay.
The change of the Cold War, end of the Cold War, and the radical transformation of international order was the key factor which enabled India to abandon the pro-Palestinian position to more middle ground. The transition happened because end of the Cold War.
Oh. So thank you for your answer. Romba nandri, sir.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kesavan. Next in line is Kaushal Raj, please. You could unmute yourself. You're muted.
Hello, sir. I'm audible.
Audible, but not visual. I cannot see you. Good.
Okay. Hello, sir. My name is. So What
listen,
is the difference between
listen, switch
PLO
off the
and Hamas?
video. The audio is a problem. Switch off the video. The lines seem to be bad. Switch off the video so that the line bandwidth seem to be small. Okay.
Okay, sir. My question is that what is the difference between PLO and Hamas? And
Ah.
what is the difference between their ideology?
Between?
And if you see that, what is the difference between PLO and Hamas, and what is the difference between their ideology about Palestine?
Okay.
And here is one more question, sir. What is the main reason of the conflict between Hamas and Fatah?
Okay. If you look at all of them, PLO is an umbrella organization of various Palestinian groups. And Hamas emerged as an alternative in the wake of the First Intifada. And the basic idea is, over a period of time, the PLO has adopted what you would call political pragmatism. It was ready to coexist with Israel and eventually accepted the two-state solution, that is, Israel and a Palestinian state existing side by side. For a lot of time, Hamas looked at the whole Palestine as an Islamic Waqf property, and it has not been completely reconciled to the idea of coexisting with Israel. And that is what, if you look at it, the idea is you want a Palestinian state, yes, along with Israel or in place of Israel. That is largely the difference between the Fatah and Hamas. One wants to coexist with Israel, and the other still not ready to coexist with Israel. These are the basic differences. That is why the Fatah and Hamas also have a dispute over what kind of Palestine in terms of territorial limits and in terms of political ideology they should have. That is what the real issue is.
Okay, sir, but if we look that Fatah is supported by United Kingdom and United States of America.
Which one?
In other case, Fatah is supported by United States of America and United Kingdom. But in the other way, Hamas is treated by terrorist organization all over the world. Before few days, in the conflict between Hamas and Israel, there is no one country that who supported Hamas directly. If we see that in Hindi पर्दे के पीछे, many more countries supported Hamas, but not in the direct way. No one supported him. So, what is the future of Hamas in Palestine in future?
There are two options. Because Hamas is militarily very powerful, it has the ability to undermine any peace agreement. You cannot have a peace agreement without Hamas. It's impossible. At the same time, Hamas is not ready to coexist. So you need to find out a compromise whereby Hamas dilutes his position and the international community co-opts Hamas into the peace process. The only way that is possible is somehow Hamas is brought under the Palestinian Authority. You are trying to undermine, because what Hamas is trying to do in fighting Israel, you are not only fighting Israel, you are also undermining the Palestinian Authority or the PLO or Fatah. So this is where the international community had to be careful. You need to bring them together, but without undermining the Fatah and the PLO. That is the real challenge.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Kaushal. I'm afraid we are running out of time, so I'll just take one question that's from Badal Waghela. If you can go ahead, please.
Hello, Mr. Professor. It's great
Yes.
to hear you. My question is in the relation between Israel and China, because China is nowadays more attacking on Israel in various platforms.
What did you say? I can't hear you. What is the second part?
China is more attacking on Israel in various in international platforms. So what is the relation between China and Israel in future?
That's a very complicated relationship. And China has invested enormously in Israel. And we don't pay much attention to that. China is building a large number of infrastructure projects in Israel. It has invested in the very high-tech companies in Israel. So while the political criticism is one part of the story, but the other part of the story is the economic engagement in investment in China. I'll just give an example. Later this year, the Chinese company will have the right to operate Haifa port for 25 years. And Haifa port is normally used by the Fifth Fleet. So that is the kind of, you are talking about roads, rails, tunnels, and ports. They are built by Chinese companies. And some of the Chinese companies are actually active in Israel as well as in Iran. Israelis knew it. So Israel has been benefiting from China in a large way, economically speaking. So the political criticism is only one part of the story. That doesn't tell you the full picture.
Thanks, Badal. Sir, I had a question on similar lines, what he asked. You told that they have such a large economic footprint. So how comfortable the US finds it, like ports, which was used by the Fifth Fleet, and then the roads and tunnels and everything?
Yeah, that is what, people pay attention to Jerusalem, Golan Heights, settlements, and Abraham Accord. The same Trump administration was furious with Israel on China. If you look at the Israeli pictures, there was a suggestion that Israel is going to give the contract for the largest desalination plant for a Chinese company, consortium, Hong Kong-based consortium. When the process was on, right in the middle of the COVID, right in the middle of the travel restrictions, social restrictions and everything, Secretary of State Pompeo comes to Israel and tells Netanyahu, this is not done. And Israel quietly said the contract went to somebody else. Similarly, the Americans are saying, develop 5G, yes. With the Chinese technology, no. So therefore, this is one of the tension between the Trump administration and Netanyahu, which normally we don't pay attention to that. That was very real.
Thank you, sir. So we have come to the end of today's talk. So I'd like to thank you, sir, again. It is really a privilege to have you with us today. I thank, on behalf of Yatharth, all the participants who participated in the talk. So Yatharth will be back soon with such another edition of talk. Till then, take care, everyone.